but you get what you want. This is the standalone client that you install on Windows. So I can say convert machine, and some of the, you have to pick out your source type. So you can say this powered on machine. You can say, you know, VMware infrastructure virtual machine, so you could log into vCenter and convert one. VMware workstation, backup images, third-party virtual machines, Hyper-V. So if anybody has Hyper-V, they can convert. In this case, I'm going to say this local machine.
You ever converted a Hyper-V?
I've done Hyper-V stuff before.
So, you know, with a VMware virtual machine, it can be offline.
Yeah.
Even with this tool. And you know about Hyper-V?
Hyper-V, I've always, the only times that I've done it, I've done them online.
Online. Okay.
Yeah. So I've just went and pointed at, you know, so here you go, suck it all in. It's been okay. It's worked all right. So now I'm going to log into my vCenter because I'm telling it where to go. And you have to pick out a place and give it a new server name. And you hit next and tell it to, you know, this VM's fine. Let's put it on the Birk.net cluster. That sounds pretty good. You have to pick out your data store, what version, virtual machine version you're running. And the really, really good stuff is right in here. If you haven't done this, you can go in and you can click on Edit, and who really wants to copy over that 250 gig drive that somebody said they needed and they're only using 10% of it? You can go in and you can shrink your disks down. So you type in your size and you just type in, you know, a new size of whatever it is, and it will shrink the disk for you. And this is under advanced here. This is where you can split up your partitions. So you can pick up and say, all right, in this case, this VM only has one C drive, so you don't see this, and I don't have any other partitions. But
so it compresses the data?
it doesn't really compress the data. The data still remains out on the device. I mean, if you have 2 gigabytes on your physical, you're still going to have 2 gigabytes on your virtual when it gets done. But what it does is you can take out that blank space that no one's using. So if you want to, you can shrink it all that way. So if you want to, you can change your memory here. So shrink your memory down to a decent size. You can change the sockets and cores. One thing, if you guys haven't upgraded to 5 or aren't, is there anybody that hasn't seen this yet? You can now change your sockets, the way you present CPUs to your VMs. So you can say, you know, a vCPU normally would have been one socket. So now you can say, I want one socket with 4 cores. So that way, if you've got any applications that are like a little, you know, maybe you have to license them per socket. This is a great way to, you know, get around that until I guess they figure out a new licensing model. So you can shrink that stuff down. Mostly, if you're P2Ving, you're probably going to go to 1. You can remap the networks. One thing that I always like to do if you're doing online P2Vs is stop all the unneeded services. So before you actually go out and actually do the PVs, you can actually stop them in here. So like any services that you don't need, the only things that I really keep up is anything like networking related, but you can go in here and check the box and kill all the services. You can tell it to synchronize the changes, so anything that's going on during the P2V will be synchronized. Under post-conversion, you can install VMware tools in it. And then under throttling, if for some reason you need to throttle your, typically I've never really set this, but you can actually go in and say, I want to do network bandwidth throttling for this copy. And at that point, you hit next and you click finish there, and it'll actually do the P2V. So that's the process. It's a piece of cake, it's really easy. But really all the tools that you need are on that VM Advanced ISO. You absolutely want to get that. Don't try to reinvent the wheel with all of that stuff, because if you P2V, you've got so much stuff under Device Manager. My biggest annoyance was having to clean up everything under Device Manager. For the most part, the rest of this stuff is pretty easy and straightforward. The times that you see P2Vs fail is probably because there's too much going on. There's too many services running, and you kill those, and you're all right. Any type of, like if you're going to P2V, has anybody P2V SQL before? Probably want to make sure your databases are all stopped on it. It's probably a good practice. Exchange, probably the same way. Active Directory, you know, I would anything that's got a lot of I/O.
Changes forever.
Yeah, exactly.
We haven't done a P2V for a long time.
Yep.
When we went and did one just a few weeks ago. It told us that the new VMware version had a duplicate IP address. And then we said, no, there isn't. We tried pinging it, it wouldn't answer a ping. But it turns out one of those disabled network adapters in the device manager had the old IP address.
It's good. That's good.
You'd have to dig around and find it.
Yep. That would be handy.
That was before you showed up.
We've ran into that stuff before, and those are tools that, I mean, they're lifesavers. So I told you, if you guys want to, 5 minutes, if you guys have to go, that's fine too, but I configured fault tolerance in my lab, and it's pretty sweet if you haven't seen it. So you can see up there, I've got that Windows 2008 VM, and I enabled it for fault tolerance. So when you turn on fault tolerance for the first time, you can't use thin provisioning. So thin provisioning is a no-no. So when you go to enable it, I've already went ahead and did this because it has to basically convert the disk. So the disk, when you turn on fault tolerance on a VM, it basically converts it from a thin disk to a thick disk, eager 0. So it's going to zero out the disk. So in terms of disk performance, you're going to get the best performance out of this, and that's just what VMware requires. So I went ahead and I've already done that. I've also powered on the VM. So let me open up the console. And logged in on it. The screen's a little small here. So this is the primary. So when you turn on fault tolerance, you have a primary and you have a secondary VM. And the primary is basically, it's essentially a read-only. The secondary becomes the read-only. So if I go over to here, I can see that I now have a secondary VM running on Neon and Argon here. It's the only thing running on it. So I moved everything over because I'm going to simulate a failure on this host. So if I open up my secondary console, you see how I can't do anything? I can't actually edit the settings or do anything to this VM, but I can open console, and it's going to tell you immediately that this VM is read-only. So I can't do anything to it. But if I come back over here to my main VM, basically everything that I do in here, it's actually VMware marketing got a hold of this, and they call this V-lock step technology. So this is it. So it's staying in sync. So what I'll do here to do the demo is, let me do open up ping, and we'll just do a YouTube video. I don't know, what do you guys want to see?
Just happen to know that off the top of your head.
Where's it at? Is there a YouTube? Where's that, Brian?
See tonight's demonstration.
Right there. Oh, right there. Here we go.
Cell phone commercials.
Just this is
That was
to
so 20 seconds ago.
this is to yeah. We're gonna bring up the our Power CLI lab that we have out on YouTube. It's a perfect opportunity to say that the Indy VMUG has a YouTube channel. You can subscribe and get all the videos. So here we are. So you can see here that I've got my ping going, and essentially what happens here is I'm going to cause a failure on my main host. So it's running on Argon. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on here, and I'm going to say reboot. The host isn't in maintenance mode. It's going to simulate that the power gets yanked out from underneath it, and I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to put a reason in here because I know we all need to put reasons in here. So now I'll pull up my VMs here. Now we just wait. One of the main host is going to die, and they'll stay in lockstep. Some of the, because I'm here to also tell it like it is, the big thing with fault tolerance is you can only use one CPU. So this is super cool, but it's also, so now it died. You see, normally if you were a user, you're not probably going to be connected to the VMware console, but it goes black for a second because it's the console connection coming back. But you can see that my other host, Neon, is now taken over. It's basically the main machine. The video's still going, pings are still going. But that's the big downside right now, is the one CPU. So I don't know if that's ever changed. Hopefully it changes.
Was the power manager set on secondary?
Yep. Now, here's my problem. That's why the reason this demo sucks is because I don't have 2 hosts. If you had 3 hosts, if you had three full hosts, it would automatically spin up the secondary and the 3rd host. But right now, if for some reason this thing would die, you still got the one single point of failure. The best way to use FT is with 3 hosts. So, but it'll come back up and you'll see that it'll sync. But just to prove the point here, the video is still going, and let's check to make sure that show you I didn't drop a ping packet here.
Well, you may have, well, that's the thing, you should have pinged the server from outside.
From the outside, you want me to just scan mine?
No,
Just not
no,
good.
You see what I'm saying, like,
That's how hackers would have done it.
That's how a hacker would have
the
done it.
screen, well, no, the screen went blank. The screen went blank, so, you know, you want to.
That's true. Yeah, that's
You see
true.
what I'm saying?
That's true. There's a flaw in my demo. Next time I do it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's flawed.
Hey, I'm just showing you the technology. This is like slow to adopt. Because I think honestly the reason this is kind of like people are not using it as much is because a lot of the things that people want to use FT for, probably more than one CPU.
It's restrictive.
So-
Or you can already cluster, like domain service.
Yeah.
You know, restart it.
But can you cluster Microsoft Bob? Like if you wanted to, you could make Microsoft Bob fully redundant with this solution. You can't do that. You can. The cool thing about FT is you can. The problem with FT is that if your app is terrible, your app is still going to be terrible. It's just going to be terrible twice. You're going to use CPU
Yeah,
memory.
it's not-
To be resilient.
Terribly resilient.
Yeah, twice the resilience. It's just awfulness. So it doesn't really help any apps. It's like, I don't know. It's a cool feature. It's a cool tool, but
Is there a memory limitation?
I don't think there is. You know if there is? I don't think there's a memory limitation.
Doesn't it also reserve all the memory ahead of time?
Yeah. So if you have, it does. It does. So if you have basically it makes a reservation. So if you've got 2 gigs of memory, it's going to reserve 2 gigs of memory. So it'll immediately set a reservation for the VM.
Well, it's got memory already loaded. It's actually using it. Using plus.
Yeah. So if you have Microsoft Bomb clustered and you're using 10 gigs of memory in there,
You have limited DRAM.
you're using twice as much CPU and memory.
Can
you run it twice. Can you use storage vMotion?
I think you can do storage,
Let's try it.
but not.
Nope. Straight out on any FTVM.
Can you
Yeah, so you can go host. So
migrate the secondary?
I'm kind of in a bind here because I only have 2 hosts. So you can't have, it won't allow the primary and the secondary to be on the same host, and where else am I going to put it? So you can migrate the host. So there you go. Virtual machines in the same fault tolerance pair cannot be on the same host. It covers you.
If you have like a web server that just can't have it fail.
It's good.
You got one single CPU, good
Yep.
solution. And even if it's a Windows issue where it locks up, Windows locks up, blue screen, the other one keeps on going.
Well, in this case, if Windows would blue screen, it'll blue screen the other
On
one.
both.
It'll blue screen twice. You'll get twice the awesomeness. Twice the blue.
Yeah, so
That's why they call it Azure.
It won't fix change management issues. Where if you change the IP address for one and screw it up, it's not going to, it's going to then change the IP address again.
Yeah, so it's cool. I imagine it'll get better. I've been told that things will improve on this eventually. But we don't have.
You want to tell them a little bit about your home lab, your shuttles? I didn't.
Yeah, my home labs are running on shuttle desktop XPC systems. It's a
$800 setup?
less than $800 for each server. But yeah, I've got some Intel NICs. Just bought everything on new it. Put 16 gigs of RAM in each one of these things, and ESXi5 installs right to it. No weird You don't have to modify it or anything, it boots right to it, and it's perfect for testing and stuff, so.
What would happen if you virtualized ESXi on one of the hosts and tried to use that as a third host?
That would be ridiculous. I mean, that's something I should test. Now you have my mind going, I should do that.
Could you FT protect?
Could you fault tolerance ESXi? You could. ESXi can virtualize itself. Although there are some like processor limitations, so I don't know if you can like turn on FT inside.
One way.
That's one of the reasons I don't think, we don't, in the class, like the official class of VMware, we don't even do a fault tolerance lab. But I always like to demo it, because we talk about HA, we talk about fault tolerance, but in terms of seeing it, if they see HA in the lab, they don't see any of this stuff.
Do you have dedicated network adapters for your FT network?
No. So you have to remember, with this, when you turn this on, you've got to go into a network adapter, a VM kernel interface, and turn on fault tolerance logging. And I use the same as VMUG. So you got to remember, I'm limited on my resources. I got 3 NICs to work with. It's not a huge enterprise solution there, but
It's not just-
One big virtual switch?
I'm not using VDS. I've got a couple of standard switches. I'm probably going to end up using on one cluster going to a distributed switch, but in this case, no.
Are you using the Nexus 1000D?
Not quite there yet.
Do you have an EMC symmetrics down there?
What do we have down there, Kyle?
Above the EMC.
Yeah, we have some EMC storage. Kind of ridiculous, but so I teach part-time at IUPUI too. So Kyle works in the Department of Medicine. So he gifted
Some scraps.
some of their old junk. So my little white boxes I got a couple old Dell servers. It's making people's day. So I got some serious storage that I need to get connected to these shuttle servers. Blow their minds. Yeah. Yeah, I went with cloud names and table of elements.
What did you use for your home storage?
OpenFiler, and then I also have like I use OpenFiler in a VM, and then I have a 5 terabyte NAS that I like split up with. I use some NFS, some iSCSI. It's a Thecus. I can't recommend the product. The product is terrible. It's a Thecus N50-200 Pro. I bought it like 3 or 4 years ago, but they haven't updated the firmware in about a year and a half. And it's an enterprise product, but what do you get for $600? I threw some drives in it, and that was it. It's cool to learn on, but if I had to do it again, if I had to buy like a small little SAN I'd probably buy a Synology. Those are pretty solid. Those are good units. The firmware's barely updated, but I can't recommend the Thecus units.
I would not recommend Buffalo Terrace Station.
Anything you can buy at Fry's is probably, I don't know if Fry's
Hey, taking
sells
Synology there.
That was my SAN a year and a half ago.
Yeah, the QNAPs, I've heard good things. So the reviews that I did on the home lab stuff, people were saying Synology and the QNAPs were one of the better units you can buy. The one I've got is just, it works, and that's about it. So, that's all I got.